My computer says it is live streaming.
We've just started live streaming. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Right, welcome to this meeting of Budget and Policy, Tuesday, 20th of October 2020. First of all, I'd ask that the clerk has just confirmed that we are live streaming. I am Councillor Ginny Parker. I'm Deputy Chair of Budget and Policy, and I'm acting chair for this meeting. Can I ask members present to indicate by a physical show of hands that they can hear proceedings? Oh, hi, Pete.
Hello.
Lovely, thank you. And a roll call now of committee members. Councillor Johnson.
I'm here and I can see you.
Great. Councillor Ewings has given her apologies, I believe.
Only for the start of the meeting. She hopes to join us later.
Okay. Councillor Harry Smith.
I can hear you.
Councillor Andy Sutton.
Yeah, I can hear. Thank you.
Councillor James Ellis.
I can hear you.
Councillor Leslie Crawford.
Yes, I can hear you.
Councillor Paul Williamson.
Yeah, I can hear you.
And Councillor Harry Smith. Harry, can you?
Yeah, I've already responded. You called me earlier, didn't you?
Oh, sorry, yes. And Councillor Ursula Mann, please.
I'm here. Thanks, I can hear.
And our other councillors in attendance, Councillor Paul Ward, Councillor Pete Squires, and Councillor Barry Smith. Thank you. Councillors and officers are asked to ensure that they have included their name against their thumbnail so they can be clearly seen by viewers. In accordance with normal practice on each matter that falls to be considered by the committee, I shall give the opportunity for council of the committee to speak first before giving an opportunity to ward members who wish to speak. Members who wish to speak are asked to raise their hand. I will ask non-committee members not to raise a hand until I invite them to do so after committee members have spoken. The quorum which we have met for this Budget and Policy Committee is 3. May I remind councillors and the public that the documents for this meeting are available on the council website. Please note that members are asked not to use the share documents facility in this meeting. In addition, may I remind you all to stay muted until called to speak and to remute once you have spoken. When I call you to speak, I will state your name. In the interest of transparency, try not to use the comments facility to communicate during the meeting other than with myself in the open forum. In no circumstances should it be used for private discussions. Voting will either be by assent of the members of the committee or by roll call vote. For roll call, members are asked to state either for, against, or abstain when asked. If a councillor declares an interest, they will be temporarily removed from the meeting until the matter has been resolved and then readmitted. When the public part of the meeting concludes, there will be a brief adjournment of 10 minutes to enable councillors to log back in for the confidential part of the meeting. Okay, I will now move on to the agenda. Apologies for absence.
We have an apology, Madam Chairman, from Councillor Mrs. Ewings for late arrival.
And that's it. Okay. Agenda item 2, confirmation of minutes. To confirm the minutes of the meeting of Budget and Policy Committee held on the 8th of September 2020.
Move that they're a correct record, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Harry. Someone to second that? Thank you, Andy. Item number 3, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? And please remember that obviously you can, if at a later stage you identify a conflict of interest, you can identify that at the time and should do so. Okay. Now I move on to items for recommendation to council. Agenda item 4, budget preparation and precept setting. To consider the report of the town clerk in connection with the above. Can I pass over to you, Carl?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The report, I hope, is self-explanatory. It's the first stage in the budget setting process. However, as members will be aware, this year we are in exceptional circumstances because of the impact of coronavirus, in particular on our income streams, but also on our activities. Therefore, there is a proposal within the budget that the council considers setting the precept at the latest available date, which would be the 26th of January next year. What that does is it gives the maximum amount of time to understand what the in-year effect is on our income streams and to be able to plan for next year. I've also had a conversation with the Mayor, and she's kindly agreed that we'll hold a finance workshop event for members before the next meeting of this committee, and not the next meeting of council, but the following meeting, before the following meeting of council, to give all members an opportunity really to contribute to the sort of assumptions that we're going to be making in terms of putting together a more detailed budget. So this is very much the outline, it's the conceptual analysis of the position that we find ourselves in. It's an assessment and understanding of the risks and the opportunities that we have going forwards, and it's highlighting some of the uncertainties. So, for example, we are in the process of liaising with Heritage Lottery Fund to seek to put together a bid for additional coronavirus-related funding relief with regard to the Guildhall project. I'm happy to take any questions on it, but I say very much conceptual at this stage. And I think an opportunity for members to either comment on some of the assumptions that are included in there, Madam Chairman, or indeed to make suggestions as to how they feel that we should be approaching the budget setting process for the next financial year. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. I would like to start with a question, and that refers to what you've just said about a finance workshop. Is that, because in paragraph 7 you refer to recommendations, any principles that the committee would wish to be applied or areas of change identified for the development of the budget. Is that the sort of thing you are thinking will take place in the workshop?
I think it's perfectly appropriate for members to raise issues here. In the past, what that would have applied to would have been things like the historic policy of the council, which was that we would increase the precept by an amount which at least equated to the reduction in localisation of council tax, which was passported on to us by the borough council. So that's the sort of thing that's talking about. I think what the workshop needs to do is, as you'll appreciate, in normal years, in every year pretty much, what you do is you focus 90% of your time working on expenditure, because you know within a reasonable margin what your income is likely to be that from commercial streams, be it from the precept or other income streams that are available to you. This year, I think we probably see that turned on its head. The highest level of uncertainty is how do we predict what commercial income is going to be, and bearing in mind that historically, until very recently, we're geared sort of £2 of income that we receive from commercial income for every £1 of precept. It means there's always been a high level of commercial subsidy of public services by the council. If that commercial subsidy is going to be reduced as an organisation, part of what the workshop will be about is about understanding and making appropriate assumptions to be able to predict with the highest level of accuracy is probably the wrong word because of the uncertainties we face, but the highest level of assurance that we can, what the income is going to be. And from that, we then need to work out what an affordable level of expenditure is across the various budget heads. So I think that is what the primary focus of that is going to be, so that if we can agree the assumptions in relation to income, then we can start to put together a meaningful budget which meets your expectations within that framework to deliver the goals that you have as a council.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? No? Andy?
I would just completely like to agree with what the clerk said, that we set the precept at the absolute last minute we can this year. So I'd like to move that. I think that would be a sensible working idea.
Right, okay. So I'll second that we move that we set the budget at the latest possible moment.
I think Councillor Mann was indicating, Madam Chair.
Sorry, Councillor Mann, did you want to say?
Sorry, I was just going to ask whether there was any sort of general knowledge about how people are trying to set their budget and at the local parish council level. I just wondered if there was any input from the local organizations like DALC or, as far as how people are, what percentage of income reduction people are using or how they're figuring that out.
I think the difficulty that we have is we are unrepresentative, not just in Devon, but nationally. So that there's probably, I'm going to guess, but out of the 10,000 town and parish councils in the country, I suspect that we are in the top 50, at least, possibly less than that, of those who generate the highest percentage of their income from commercial income streams. In Devon and Cornwall, which I've got quite a good knowledge of, there is only one council which generates more income from commercial income streams than ourselves, and their position is, I think, unique nationally because they don't actually generate anything from the precept. So the difficulty is what COVID has done to us is a dramatic impact because of the nature of where our commercial income streams are. For other councils, you range from those who've been impacted to some degree to those who, quite frankly, have been delivering less services because of COVID, but with the same amount of money from their precept, substantially funded from precept, who will actually have been able to transfer money into reserves. So there isn't a one size fits all. What I would say, though, is I think at the moment, in terms of larger councils nationally, we are one of a handful who are affected as badly as we are, both in terms of percentage of the budget which is affected and in terms of the actual real terms quantum that seems to be materializing at the moment. And when we've got the half year figures worked through, we'll be able to have that conversation with you as members to get a feel for where we're at the half year mark and where that might lead us to at the end of the financial year.
Ursula.
Just a follow-up question. Are we looking to any commercial guides on that? Like, renting associations? I mean, obviously a lot of our income comes from industries that we could be looking to find out what their predictions are for next year. Is that how we go about it, or?
You've got two main commercial income streams. One of those is your rentals, that is to say, principally shops, not exclusively, but principally. In the case of that, you will have received a confidential report, I think 2 meetings ago, which set out the sector expectations from your surveyor in terms of impact on new rental levels going forwards. In terms of the market side of things, that is more about, and I mean, the National Association of British Market Authorities, which is the representative body, is currently predicting that over the course of 18 months, 2 years from the outset of COVID, that between 30 and 40% of markets nationally will actually close. So that is more an issue of what we can do to, in the short term, help the market to survive and to continue, and then in the long term, provide a basis for it to thrive. There isn't really a median that we can apply in the same way as you can with rental properties in terms of good practice on that, because every market is unique. But part of the discussion that we'll be having with you as members is the assumptions that we are suggesting you might wish to consider as a basis for what future market income would be. And those will be based upon things like social distancing, days and hours of operating, and essentially the number of market stalls that we can put in safely and appropriately within the current environment and what we anticipate the environment might be in the next financial year. So those are the variables. Coming up with a copper-bottomed answer, to be perfectly honest, I don't think anyone's going to be able to do that. We can make our best estimate, having considered the circumstances and the views of members.
Carl, is one of the principles then maybe that we ought to address is, whilst this current crisis continues, is more frequent reviewing of, and I know we do get plenty of reports, but snapshots, as it were, of what is happening with regard to government regulation and turnovers in the town, vacancies, things like that are having an impact on our commercial income.
I think, I mean, we report on voids and prospective voids at each meeting of the council. So I think that information is already feeding its way through. Where government changes legislation in such a way as to impact upon council services, again, we feed that through directly. But that realistically is going to be legislative or regulatory changes that they introduce, such as the lockdown, alongside whether or not there are supplementary measures put in place by government to support businesses. So we do bring, and we will bring those forward if and as changes happen. Clearly, there is the potential of not complications, but of changed circumstances arising from the tier 1, 2, and 3 lockdowns that the government has introduced. And in the event that we were to go to a tier 3 in Devon, then of course one of the things that we would need to look at would be whether or not the package of support measures for businesses was helpful to our tenants or not. I think the one, and that's the discussion that's been going on in Greater Manchester at the moment, I think the one thing that we can be sure of is that it is highly unlikely there will be any additional support for town and parish councils or as landlords, because there isn't even support for principal councils as landlords within the government's income support scheme. I think it's also fair to say that the decision of the government to restrict the income support scheme to principal councils, with the honourable exception of one other council in the country who has decided to actually passport that on to town and parishes, has not been taken up by any of the principal authorities, and therefore we don't anticipate there will be any support for lost income streams for ourselves. Having said that, West Devon Borough Council, working with the other principal authorities in Devon, I understand have, I don't know if they've actually agreed in principle, but they've mooted in principle a support scheme of last resort, should it be needed for councils who find themselves in exceptional circumstances. But we very much hope that that won't be something that we would need to draw upon, but it is there should it be needed.
Thank you. Any other questions? Harry?
I wanted to wait till now, Chairman, for people who wanted to raise questions on the report. I want to raise something which is connected with the report, but not directly within the report. The report does talk about staffing and talks about the number of staff we haven't replaced. On the other side of that is that we as a council or as members mustn't forget that it's not beyond the realms of possibility that staff members that we have currently might want to move onwards and upwards. Therefore, they're not. There's nothing which says that a staff member wouldn't be able to do that. And in that respect, the government is currently running a consultation on exit pay. from local government sector. It focuses on those members who are eligible for the local government pension scheme. And I've looked at the proposals and I don't think we should have any concerns. However, the government is trying to establish, I believe, if there are any groups who would, or within the general employment, that would be adversely affected by what they're proposing, and how that they might mitigate that. The impact, I think, might be worth if at least having a look at, and any non-impact, which is what I hope it would have, be included in some sort of future report when it talks about staffing.
Carl.
Thank you. Yes, there is a consultation out. I think it is actually, although the consultation date, if memory serves me right, is November, I think things are actually much more advanced than that. I understand from certain sources that there may be a decision which is made before the consultation date is actually reached. Essentially, what the government, you may recall, I think starting in 2015, the then government started talking about a £95,000 cap on staff exiting public sector jobs. Now, I think a lot of people assume that that was a cap in relation to redundancy payments, but it's actually a cap in relation to exit payments. What that means in practice is that if you are engaged in local government and you have a decent amount of years service and you are made redundant after the age of 55, what happens is under the pension scheme, your employer is obliged to make up your pension to a full pension, because you don't have the opportunity to work through to a full pension. That is called, and that make-up money is called the strain payment. And typically in the past, what would happen would be the employer would make a strain payment to top up the pension fund, and then it would make a redundancy payment, which was consistent with the number of years service that you'd actually undertaken or continuous service within the pension scheme. What this cap does is, and it was originally, I think, billed as addressing the very high profile leavers. You know, if you look at, I think, Teignbridge District Council, when the chief exec left, it was some hundreds of thousands of pounds, big sums of money. But looking under the bonnet of this one, if you have someone who has a decent number of years service who is receiving in the mid £30,000 worth of pay, depending on their age profile, it does start to hit. So I think what you'll see, I don't think you're going to see an impact, picking up on Councillor Smith's point. I agree with him. I don't believe that there is going to be an impact at our level, but if you look at principal authorities, I think, just across the Tamar, 200 are being made at the moment. If those don't actually get processed relatively rapidly, anyone with long-standing service is going to find that their benefits are going to be dramatically reduced at the end of it. So I don't think it's a matter that's going to affect us, but for principal councils and the sector overall, of counties, unitaries and districts, it is going to be a major issue, and across the public sector as a whole. But there's an awful lot of issues that need to be worked out in terms of making that work, because the government hasn't yet published regulations which deal with some of those details.
Thank you, Carl. Any more questions, Harry?
I'm very grateful for that explanation, and I think that it's worth raising, because we need to know that these sorts of things are going on, and obviously the town clerk has looked at that and has formed that view. But sometimes we just need to know that has been done, and this is the view that the town clerk's taken. I do realise that the sort of levels of salary they're talking about, but the way that things are going, it started off looking at very high salaries, but when you start looking at some of the text that's within the the document, it's not that high when you consider the officers of a local authority can easily be, you know, it doesn't have to be a great position to be on £30,000 a year in some authorities.
Yes, thank you for that, Harry. I think one of the things that I'm concerned about is the ability of members to know and understand all risks associated with the budget and the budget setting. And so therefore, items such as that, whilst they, from what the town clerk has said, don't appear to be a risk, but things may pop up that become a risk for our budget. And somehow we have to kind of gather them all up and understand their relative urgency or their relative priority in terms of our own budget. Okay, if there are no more questions, I'll move on to agenda item 5, Commercial and Community Service Plan. Over to you, Wayne.
Really got nothing further to add apart from to highlight in the projects, the two main risk items relate to the 2 capital projects for this year, and obviously our markets and events activities. I think it's worth noting that within the report or the service plan, I've suggested that the town hall at least stays closed until the end of March. We've only currently got a council decision until the end of December. So, you know, from my service plan, I'm making it quite clear that I don't think it's feasible to reopen the town hall in the final quarter. And then it's to be reviewed most likely sometime in January. I think it's worth noting we've got an item later on the agenda, the challenges around Butchers Hall, which I will go into in more detail later on the agenda. And also that within the KPIs, we've got a target for next year around income, which relates to Bedford Square, about trying to maximise trading on Bedford Square from Tuesdays to Saturdays, especially with the challenges around COVID. Having an open air market which is fully functioning probably is the best way to try and achieve additional income with the challenges of trying to get effective activities back in the town hall. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Anne.
Thank you. Can I first of all thank Wayne for this report? There's a huge amount of work gone into it, and I know he's under a lot of pressure anyway. Can I just ask about the 5.2 efficiency gains to be achieved? Continue vehicle fleet review, and you put purchases on hold due to COVID-19 financial implications. I thought we agreed that that was a ring-fenced reserve that could be spent if necessary. If those vehicles, in my view, if those vehicles need replacing, they're probably costing us more money by running vehicles that are past their best than actually getting new ones. So could you put some comment on that, please, Wayne?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. We have ring fenced that element. It's just something at this stage which, in discussions with the town clerk, we pretty much sat on until later on in the year. We've managed to get all the vehicles pretty much through their MOTs. So, you know, we're conscious if we get a vehicle that is going to have disproportionate costs to keep it running, then we'll have to probably then look at vehicle replacement. But at this stage, we had a system where we were going to look at most definitely replacing one vehicle this year and then another vehicle the following year. And it's rather than just replacing the vehicles, which is good practice with where they're at with regards to the age, we're trying to keep it going at this stage without having disproportionate costs in regards to maintenance. Sorry, could I also make one other point in the risk item that I should have said in my report as well? I think following on in relation to the discussions earlier around staffing, I think it's just worth highlighting the fact of obviously there is a significant risk in relation to the depot activities and the cemetery activities. There's a significant reliance on one or two core members of staff to ensure that those services are maintained. So it's something where we need to look at probably in the last quarter potential contingencies for recruitment leading into a new financial year, most likely around the community and compliance post. because obviously our current setup past 2021 financial year probably is not sustainable. We're currently how we're operating and how we're spreading our activities across a very small core members of staff in the organisation.
Thank you. Any further questions, Anne? Yes, I'd like to ask in relation to that, with reference to staff, in particular the staff you've mentioned, what are we taking any measures to mitigate the risk at the moment?
I think from our perspective, we are trying to ensure that there's cover across all the organisations. So, for example, we are looking at ensuring that key staff can cover over in other areas, so in the markets team, etc. In relation to the depot, we're at where we're at, to be honest. There is a reliance on primarily 2 members of staff to run the depot and cemetery activities, which is the town hall and events manager and myself, or town hall and events manager in consultation with myself. And there is no further contingency in relation to that, because it's just not physically achievable at the moment, because all other areas of the activity are stretched. So that is the biggest risk. And like I said, there are some pre-planned projects that we're moving into now around Christmas lights, etc. We need to recognise that I think the next spike, depending on what impacts we have with regards to COVID and how we have to firefight, the next real spike in relation to the depot activities is when you start reaching the March period again, and the grass cutting season and all the other community and partnership activities that we support. So that's where I'm saying that it's absolutely critical that probably around February time, we start looking at that community and compliance officer post to ensure that there is that additional support then across the organisation.
Thank you. Any other questions? Harry?
Yes, Wayne, the Betsy Grimble's Tower was previously a grant, and we did some work with that, because your report's saying that you're trying to get some grants. I thought originally we had some money for Betsy Grimble's Tower.
You're correct. I think we secured, from memory, I think it was in the region of £10,000 from Historic England to have 2 condition surveys undertaken. Those condition surveys were carried out by LePage Architects. The next stage of that, I think there was recommendations in the region of, from memory, about 130k's worth of work to both Betsy Grimble's Tower and the Still Tower. Part of the discussions we had with Historic England at the time, that they would, I think, potentially fund up to 80% of a new application to undertake those works, as long as it was match funded by 20% from the town council as landowner or landlord or whatever you want to call it. Obviously, discussions were ongoing in relation to that. We're now at the stage where communications, different people changed in Historic England, etc., and that was never taken forward. I'm not sure where we're at in relation to the amount of money that's available in relation to grant funding with Historic England as well at the moment. And also, there was a cap, from what I can recall, which I think was in the region of around 100,000. So we wouldn't have been able to fully fund all the works that were suggested at the time anyhow. So part of the discussions were whether to focus on Betsy Grimble's Tower and the Abbey Cloisters and leave the Still Tower, or how we could approach it in general. I think that's something that just needs to be taken forward probably in 2021 at some stage.
So can I just confirm, we need to consider whether we want to take that forward to the next year's budget?
When you say next year's budget, Harry, you mean 21, 22?
Sorry, that's the one I meant. Yeah, the next one on.
So that needs would need to go into this preparation. Carl.
Thank you. We have referenced in the budget setting report some of the outstanding areas. One of them is Betsy Grimble's Tower. There's definitely another one which is in relation to the riverbank at Market Road. So those are things which I would anticipate that we will need to have a conversation around. The challenge around both of those is that they are potentially significant projects. Clearly, if Betsy Grimble's Tower is still able to source that level of grant funding, that has the potential to make it much more manageable. The Market Road riverbank issue, depending on what might be needed, could potentially be very much more significant than that.
Thank you. Wayne, did you still want to say something?
No, it's fine.
Thank you. Any other questions? Can I move then that this report be sent forward to full council? Seconder, please. Harry, thank you. Right. Agenda item 6, interpretation board wording. This is the Drake statue interpretation board wording. And this item refers to a short paper you've received with 5 different options for the wording, the explanatory wording for why the interpretation board is there, not the actual wording content on the boards. Just to give you the background, Budget and Policy on the 8th of September considered a progress report on the work to deliver an interpretation of a board for Drake statue, and the committee endorsed the recommendation subject to the amendment that the approval of the language on the information panel acknowledging Tavistock Town Council's role in the erection of the panel would go via the next Budget and Policy Committee, i.e. this committee. Thus, you have the 5 options that were considered by the subgroup in the preparation of the report. And the one option that was chosen by the subgroup was number 5. However, I think as appropriate to this committee, we need to find the best option as far as this committee is concerned. So I suggest that we have a system of voting where you can, I assume everybody's read the 5 options, or do people want some time to read the 5 options? Fine, everybody's read the 5 options. Simply that we vote on our preferred option, and if Jan will take a note of the result, and we keep going until we have one final recommendation. Carl.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I suppose all it was just to observe that, of course, there may be other options which members wish to put forward, or variations on those options, which you may wish to consider.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so if I call out...
You have Councillor Ellis indicating, Madam Chair.
James.
Yeah, I'd like to discuss these before we go to a preordained vote. I mean, in my opinion, my humble opinion, paragraph 1 is the best suit for the town as a whole. However, I would like to propose some amendments to that paragraph, if I may. So my amendments would be on sentence number 2, delete the words "in recognition of the need," and in sentence number 3, delete the words "here at the statue." So it would read, "This panel was produced in 2020 by Tavistock Town Council in partnership with Tavistock Heritage Trust to provide more information on the life of Sir Francis Drake. I think this is the most balanced, neutral approach for the town and is my preferred option.
Thank you, James. Would somebody like to second that amendment? Andrew? Seconded.
I would like to second it. Yes, I think that's absolutely fine. It says exactly what it is.
Thank you. Thank you, James. Do you have any more?
No. I mean, if it's, you know, everyone's happy with that amendment, then, you know, then we can go to the vote if you so deem it.
Thank you. Leslie?
Thank you. I would prefer to see an option that recognises the reasons why we are putting up this panel, because historically we need to understand the effect of racism and all the links that Drake had with the past. So I just think by not doing that, we are doing exactly what the whole Black Lives Matter movement is saying, that we're omitting them from history. And I think it's really, really important that we acknowledge that the reason we're doing this is because of events that happened this year. That's my own opinion, really, which is one of the reasons why I tend to prefer number 5. I'm quite happy with any one of the others, but I just want to have a recognition that there were events that led to this. Otherwise, why are we doing it? And we're not acknowledging it, and we are omitting a section of our community.
Thank you, Leslie. Paul? Sorry, Harry. Paul?
Yeah, I looked at them and would say that the first one without the amendment to me struck me as being not likely to cause offence or disagreement, and to be somewhat dull, in the dictionary, anodyne. And that's exactly something I think we as a council, we might try to achieve. Politicising it or including reference to bodies such as Black Lives Matter, racism, etc., rather strays into the ground of contention, which is exactly what we don't want to achieve as a council and as a representative body to a constituency that is largely unknowing, unwishing to know about some of the aspects of that Councillor Crawford mentioned. So I would entirely agree with the amendment, actually, that Councillor Ellis has helpfully put forward, that the first preference be the one at the top of the page.
Thank you, Paul. Harry?
Yeah, I was thinking just a few minutes ago, what's the difference between the amended number 1 and number 2? And I just think that, having listened to what Councillor Williamson's just said and what Councillor Crawford stated, that it sort of encompasses the whole thing by saying that following a campaign. It doesn't say by whom or anything like that. It just says following a campaign to remove the statue, the Tavistock Town Council and Heritage Trust did this. To me, that seems like the sort of statement that ought to be on there.
Thank you, Harry. I would just like to comment that, and it was me who wrote those options, and that's all they were. I feel that we are more resilient as a community and as a council when we're honest with ourselves and honest with our community, and that gives us the chance to engage properly with people rather than pushing things under the carpet. But I'll say no more. That's my opinion. Shall we now go to a vote on, and we have an amended 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So
Can I just clarify, Madam Chair? I think in practical voting terms, if one of these has got a majority, then that's going to be the one that carries. So when they're voting, if the first proposition, whatever that one is, carries, that's what goes forward to council. If it fails, then we move on to the next and next, as the case may be. But I don't think we can go through and sort of take a vote and then sort of see how many people voted for each one. It's going, the one that carries a majority of votes at the time it is put will be the one which needs to go forward to council.
Okay. Yes. Sorry. But we presumably take committee members' votes only, or committee?
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, at the moment, you have a proposition from Councillor Ellis, seconded by Councillor Hutton. Because a amendment is necessarily to insert or remove or add words, what Councillor Smith has said would be a separate proposition in the event that the first proposition fails, because it's not actually technically an amendment of the first one. So you've got one proposition, and then Councillor Smith has, I think, mooted what he intends to be a second proposition, and in the event that that's seconded and the first one fails, then we would move on to that one.
Right. Okay. Okay. The amended proposal 1. Sorry,
Councillor Crawford.
Leslie.
Sorry, can I second Councillor Smith's recommendation that number 2, for number 2?
Certainly.
Thank you.
And Paul?
Thank you, Ginny. Speaking as a ward member, I'm not happy that BNP make this decision. I think this has to go to full council, and I don't think it should just be one version going to full council. I think full council should have sight of a range of options. For what it's worth, my personal preference would indeed be number 5, because I think it does reflect the reality of the situation. I find the others rather bland and, to quote a very nice word, anodyne. Thank you, Paul. And I think that 5 would be the one that I would go for. But I actually I don't think this is a decision that should be made by this committee.
Thank you, Paul. Carl?
Just to be clear, there is no decision, there is no delegated authority with this committee. The decision will be made by council. This is a recommendation, whatever it is, of whatever it is the committee wishes to recommend to council for consideration, but there is no question of a decision being made here tonight.
So all 5 options would go forward to full council?
Well, if the motions that have been put are defeated, and this committee then moves that it does not wish to make a recommendation to council, and it defers that responsibility to council without any indication from this committee as to what its view is. Of course, it can do so. It rather does obviate the purpose of this committee, which is to deliberate, to discuss in detail, and then to make recommendations to council, having deliberated as to what it considers to be the best approach. But it's very much a matter for members.
Thank you. I propose then that we do vote on these 5 options, taking them, as Carl says, in turn. And should members prefer then to take up Councillor Ward's suggestion, then we take another vote on that. Is that okay, Carl?
Yeah, I think I didn't say take them in turn. I think you've got a proposition,
yeah,
which is before you. You have another proposition which you can consider alongside that, but is not technically an amendment. You procedurally need to dispose of those 2. And if those 2 are unsuccessful, the floor is then open in order to put either the point that Councillor Ward has made in relation to all of them being referred to council, or indeed to item number 5 on the list being referred to council. But procedurally, you would deal with the propositions in the order that you've received them to see whether or not any receive a majority vote, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay. Right then.
Councillor Hutton is indicating, Madam Chair.
Andy.
I'm a little bit confused. It's as though we're having a double vote on this. It's as though we're having a bit of a vote to start with as to which we like. And then if we don't really like the result of our votes, we're then going to, in effect, nullify our vote and say, well, actually, let's take it all to council. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but that's the way it comes over. Is that there's a bit of uncertainty here as to what we're actually aiming to get.
Just to clarify matters, in any meeting, a majority of members voting have the opportunity to determine a matter. In this case, that determination will be a recommendation to council. Therefore, you've got a proposition which has been put forward by Councillor Ellis, which was the first proposition, and propositions are taken in order procedurally. If that succeeds, that is the recommendation to council. If that fails, you then have a proposition from Councillor Smith, which is then put. If that succeeds, that's what goes to council. If that fails, then the table is clear and you have an opportunity to put another proposition, which may or may not be to refer all of these to council, or it may be to go for one of the other options, or indeed a different option. But procedurally, you deal with the propositions in the order in which they occur, and it is only by a proposition being defeated that enables you then to move on to the next one. Of course, an amendment can be put to propositions along the way, but that needs to be the addition or the insertion of words or equivalent. It must not change the fundamental meaning or otherwise negate the original proposition.
So our first proposition is the amended number 1. Correct. Oh, Leslie.
Sorry, struggling to unmute there. I'm still a little bit confused. How do we measure whether something succeeds or fails? By just a clear majority? And are we voting on all 5, which comes back to Councillor Ward's point about we need to consider those? I mean, should we be looking at those things? So just procedurally, I'm quite confused, really.
Just to clarify again, in a council meeting, a decision can only be made by a majority of those members eligible, present and voting. You have a proposition before you, which is the proposition put forward by Councillor Ellis. If that is carried by a majority of members present and voting of this committee, that is the recommendation which goes to council. If that fails, and assuming that Councillor Smith, and I think it was seconded by yourself, going for option 2, the same thing applies. Either there's a majority in favour or there isn't. If it falls, then the table is clear for another proposition to be put, and I'm anticipating, but I don't know because it hasn't been put yet, and it wouldn't be appropriate to be put yet at this stage because you've already got 2 on the table, that might well be to refer all matters to council, with this committee deciding that it's not a decision that it wishes, or not a recommendation that it wishes to make to council. But we have to deal with the propositions in the order in which they arise, and it's a simple majority in the same way as all council meetings and all council decisions, which will be required in order for any one of those recommendations, or indeed any future proposition, if those fall, to actually be made to council.
Okay, thank you, Carl. Right, number 1. Who wishes for the amended number 1 to be the one that is put forward to council? Anne Johnson, Paul Williamson, James Ellis, Andy Sutton. So, membership, is that a majority? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Carl, that's...
We haven't had a vote against it yet, Chair.
Oh, sorry, yes. Those not in favour.
So that appears to be carried by 4 votes. No, sorry, that is a tie, 4 votes to 4. That means that as chair, you have the opportunity to either exercise your casting vote or not, as you wish.
I don't wish to exercise my casting vote. It is not my preferred option. Do I have the choice to, this is complicated, present another option, or is it Paul's suggestion that now takes over?
In the event that you're not exercising your casting vote, there is an equality of votes. There is not a simple majority, and therefore the motion falls. You then have a proposition, if you wish to accept it, which was made by Councillor Smith and seconded by Councillor Crawford, which I think, if memory serves me right, was in relation to item number 2.
Okay. Item number 2, unamended. Votes in favour for item number 2. Harry Smith, Anne Johnson, Leslie Crawford, James Ellis, Andy Sutton.
And Councillor Mrs. Mann.
Sorry. Oh, sorry, Ursula. You're in the gloom. Coach Ursula Mann.
That is carried. Having said that, you might still wish to take votes against. I'm not sure there was any member of the committee not voting. There might have been one.
I didn't vote. So votes against. Just me. So that motion is carried.
That would be the recommendation to council. Thank you.
And the recommendation to council. Yeah. Right. Okay.
Excuse me, I just wanted to explain, I'm going to turn off my camera because I'm having really terrible signal tonight. So I will still be here listening and I can hear, but I'm not going to be visible because everybody's freezing and I'm having trouble getting the audio now.
Okay, thanks, Ursula.
Chair, if I may, can I just be recorded as abstaining? I had a preference for the other option, which was tied, and I don't wish to vote on the other option.
Thank you, Paul.
And can I have my name correct, please? You've called me Andrew Sutton 4 times now, and it's Hutton.
Oh, sorry.
Doesn't normally worry me, but it'd be nice, thanks.
There was a Bristol councillor called Andy Sutton. Sorry. And he didn't have much hair either. Okay, if everybody's okay with that, we will go on to items circulated for information only. The Townscape Heritage Initiative Scheme evaluation. I'm hoping everybody did look at the web page. Any comments? Harry?
Yeah, this is when you look at this is an extremely positive report, which spans 112 pages, if you've looked at it, which I think most members will have done. And there are another 12 pages of appendices at the end, which have got some interesting facts amongst them. The report does include, I think, some lessons to be learned if we ever thought of doing something similar in the future, which, considering the nature of the project, I don't think that might be the case. The final paragraph on page 112, I think, is a really good summing up. And I don't apologize for repeating it here. It says, as a result of this funding, the town's heritage, people and community have benefited widely. Tavistock's reputation as a quality market town has been strengthened. And I think that's something that this council really should be proud of. And if we've not already put a lot of it out there to the public, we should be doing that.
Yes, thank you, Harry. I agree wholeheartedly. Carl.
I just really wanted to take the opportunity, if I could, to express appreciation to all those partners, stakeholders, and colleagues who've really made this possible over the past years. I think, you know, the council took a genuinely bold and courageous decision when it decided to do this. We were then, and we still are now, the first and only council in our sector in the country to deliver one of these schemes. There were major challenges and risks associated with that. I think it was a very courageous decision of the council, but we have been supported by the heritage community, by the business community, and by a lot of individuals within the town, and some who aren't in the town anymore, but who've actually helped to make this possible. And I think that the evaluation which has been prepared by our evaluation consultant, I hope members will feel is a fair, strongly evidentially based assessment of where we're at. It shows that we did have challenges along the way, but we got over the line. And not only did we get over the line, I think we got over the line in the circumstances in a way which I very much hope that this council and past councillors who've been associated with this project can be proud of, and that the people of the town will enjoy for years to come, because I think it really is something to be proud of. And I'd just like to express appreciation to all of those who've made it possible, both on the technical side and the collaborative side. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Carl. Any other comments? Anne.
Thank you. I'd like to echo the words of the town clerk. This has indeed been a very, very lengthy process. It was a very brave council that decided to go ahead with it. In my view, there's a very fine line between bravery and stupidity, but this was a brave decision and it was the right one to do. We have got there. If anybody hasn't read this document, it's well worth reading. It is a very good evaluation of what's gone on. And I'd like to say thank you and well done to everybody who's been involved in it. It's reflecting back, it was the right thing to do. But at the time, it was quite a brave step to take.
Thank you, Anne. Anybody else? Leslie.
Yes, I mean, I think Anne beat me to it really, but I mean, I wasn't involved in the very early stages, but I just think it has been a fantastic project. And I think once it's all finished, the whole town really will experience something pretty special, really. So well done to everyone who did that.
I would like to suggest that we take advantage of some positive news and put a press release out about it, or something to make the most of what we've achieved as a council.
We already did. It was in last week's or the previous week's Tavistock Times and Gazette.
Oh, right. It's that. Thank you. Anything else? I'll move on then to the Pannier Market update, item number 8. This is to receive a report from Dwayne, who isn't present. So who's going to present that report?
Wayne will pick that one up.
Thank you, Wayne. Over to you.
Thank you. I think in relation to the report, it just covers off the current financial situation, the fact that clearly there's been a reduction in the amount of tables that have been able to be let, primarily because of the social distancing implications, and also a reduction in the lock-ups being occupied at this stage. We are looking at moving to a period of 5 weeks trading for the last 4 weeks, 5 days trading for the last 4 weeks leading up to Christmas. There is currently a memo out consulting with other traders where that potentially might be five weeks or 6 weeks, but the consultative group recommended 4 at this stage. We've got to recognise that we believe the biggest risk period absolutely will be then moving into January, February, March in relation to maintaining the operations of the Pannier Market and having a full quota of tables which are let. We are going to have to make quite challenging decisions, as we did very early on with regards to COVID, around what is appropriate, around potential table rents, etc. It also flows in from or flows on from other elements within my service plan, which relate to the wider approach in relation to our commercial income from the markets and events activities, around recognising that obviously the town hall will stay closed until the end of March. We will try and maximise as best we can the Butchers Hall income, and also maximise as best we can the Bedford Square income as well, and potentially look at other activities in and around the meadows. Obviously, all of these are something that we need to review on an ongoing basis, depending on what the next government guidance is, and what might be imposed nationally upon us or from a local basis. But I think our biggest challenge is ensuring that we can maintain a trader base both in the pannier market and absolutely as well in Butchers Hall, which is equally critical.
Thank you. Carl.
Thank you. And I think just to add to what the General Manager said, this very much feeds into the conversation that we had regarding the budget. The reason why we asked the Reeve to put this together and why we've asked him to actually put this together now for the next 2 or 3 meetings of this committee is so that you actually as members have a tracker in relation to this, which is the most volatile area in terms of income streams and the most sensitive one to government changes and local circumstances as well. It's the opportunity really to give you the same information that's coming into us, so that you're as best informed as you can be when you come to make projections as to what the income stream that we could reasonably expect to have in place for the next financial year is, and also an understanding of where we might be subject to all the vagaries that we've talked about in relation to market income this year. So that's really the reason why we've got a specific report on this meeting, and while you'll have them going forwards while things work themselves through regarding COVID.
Thank you. I have one question, Wayne, and that concerns the Wednesday opening. The decision has clearly been taken not to open on a Wednesday because that's such a slow day for the traders. Is that likely to change? I mean, obviously in the build up to Christmas, you have a 5-day working week for 4 weeks, and then it's slow after Christmas again. So I wouldn't expect it to change, but I just wondered if there was anything that would provoke the traders into thinking that that was a possibility.
Within my service plan, I have actually identified that we would intend to target to go back to 5-day trading as of April next year.
Yeah. So, yes.
So I think we have to have that approach and that vision to actually build the trader base, to do appropriate advertising to ensure that we can get more traders in, etc., as in more new traders, to actually have that approach and vision to ensure that we actually go to five trading days, which includes the Wednesday, as of April next year.
Is there one thing that...
that's a principle then.
Yeah, yes. It seems to me, talking to traders, that having a special day, as in the Tuesdays being a antiques and collectibles or whatever you call it now, does that work for you, having a day that has an identifiable purpose?
In relation to whether it works for the organisation, it adds additional challenges in relation to turnaround of traders, etc. But we think it's absolutely imperative that we actually get back some of the identity of the pannier market, because otherwise you're going to have an operation which is the same traders every single day, and that isn't what the pannier market is about. The pannier market is about having variety, especially in the middle section of the pannier market. Yeah. So as of next Tuesday, the antiques traders which are currently housed within Butchers Hall are being relocated back into the pannier market, so that the Pannier Market will become the Antiques Tuesday themed kind of market again. So we've already taken that approach that the Tuesdays will be reintegrated back into the themed approach as of next Tuesday.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, that's great. That can go on to council. And finally, on this section of the committee, item number 9, interpretation board content. This is only for information. This is a report provided by Jerry Palby of the Tavistock Heritage Trust. And I have to tell you that obviously it is only in draft form, and already the timeline element of this information has probably been changed. Nothing's final yet, to a map showing Drake's circumnavigation of the world. James, thank you.
Sorry, I believe Madam Mayor was first and then me.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see you, Anne.
Thank you. It's just that Councillor Mrs. Govier Mrs. Ewings is trying to join the meeting. I've already sent her the link, but it's stuck in my town council outbox, as so often happens, so it won't go. So I wonder if Jan could send it to her, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Jerry Palby and the rest of the Tavistock Heritage Trust that put together such a fantastic history on Sir Francis Drake. It really was good reading. I've often wondered why, you know, when I was growing up in the town, we didn't make more of Sir Francis Drake. It just goes to show what a national hero he was, and for many people he still is.
Thank you, James. Any other comments or queries? No? Great.
The Mayor, Chairman.
Sorry, Anne.
Thank you. Back the last page, I just didn't quite understand this sentence, whether or not it's correct, I don't know. Queen Elizabeth appointed Drake as second in command of the fleet. Is that does that need correcting?
I personally, yes, I don't know. We'll raise that with Jerry.
Councillor Mann, Chair.
Sorry, Ursula.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that it is going to still be in flux, and we'll keep, obviously we'll keep you updated, but that we also have started the process of actually getting the approvals for the sign with West Devon Borough Council planning.
Thank you, Ursula. Any other comments or questions? Right, that moves forward then. Okay, I have a matter at item 10. This is a tenancy matter, so I want to move it, and it's urgent due to the current crisis, and it's confidential due to it involves the finances of a third party. So this will go forward to the confidential section of the committee. Thank you. So that brings to a conclusion the first half of our report. If councillors will all leave and then return under the second invite to Budget and Policy.